What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, the history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, April 26, 2019. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. It's been a rough week. Actually, it's been pretty much of a rough year. And so we're going to get into the program here. Claire will be joining us in hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. And let's see, for some reason the text window is freezing on me. Okay, so let's see. Let's get right on into it. Big blaring headline that came out early today, reported on Russia Today. Donald Trump has announced the United States is going to withdraw from the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty. Okay. Apparently we had a glitch on our system. No, it's still stuttering. All right, well, as long as it sounds fine, I'm sure it'll be okay. So anyway, Donald Trump... Boy, the tech just does not work. Okay, Trump has announced the U.S. is withdrawing from the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty. He's calling it badly misguided and a threat to American freedoms. Well, I think the freedom that he's talking about there is the freedom of the defense contractors to just sell weapons wherever they want around the world. And of course, from that point of view, the Arms Trade Treaty would be misguided because it's an impediment to simply making more things that kill people and selling them around. So apparently the White House is sending formal notice that America is rejecting the treaty. And he made this announcement speaking at the National Rifle Association Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana. And he's basically saying he's going to send a message asking the Senate to discontinue the treaty ratification process and to return the now rejected treaty to the Oval Office where it will be disposed of. Well, once again, this is going to show the rest of the world that the U.S. government doesn't stick with treaties. They just, when they become inconvenient, they drop them here. And that's kind of a bad start here because Trump has also announced that he wants to strike a new nuclear deal with Russia and China, building on the START treaty, which currently expires in 2021. And so he is looking this as a signature foreign policy achievement, a grand nuclear disarmament deal with Russia and China. Now, here is the problem. We had that little kerfuffle a while ago where the White House was screaming at Russia that they were in violation of the treaty, and other countries were pointing out where the U.S. was in violation of the treaty. So it's a very disjointed foreign policy. And I know that Trump prides himself on being a deal maker, but right now he seems to be breaking more deals than he's making. Interesting little article over at Zero Hedge. And it's basically saying it's no secret that political leaders are usually puppets and the real decision makers are almost never out in the open. So how do you know for certain this is the case with a specific leader? His speeches may be compelling. He probably knows all the buzzwords that'll get you to go along with what he's saying. And he might even throw you some legislative scraps to make you think he's going to follow through on his campaign promises. But does he actually believe in the principles he originally championed? And on that score, of course, Donald Trump is this major disappointment because he made a lot of promises on the campaign trail 2016, but then so did Obama, especially regarding the wars, and it just didn't happen. So this article is saying to find out what's really going on and where the war machine is going, forget about Donald Trump and watch the men around him. In this case, John Bolton and Mike Pompeo. Okay, because they're the ones who are likely calling the shots and pulling the strings. And we even had that other report that came out, I think about a month and a half, 2 months ago, where they were saying Trump basically had just turned over our foreign policy to John Bolton. So John Bolton is out there. Basically, he now has the war authority of the United States, which, by the way, the Constitution does not allow that authority to be delegated. It belongs to Congress. And Congress has sort of shirked their responsibility on that. And we've had a string of presidents who just haul off and declare war on this country and that country and over there, and Iraq and Syria and Libya, and now possibly Iran and Venezuela. And let's not forget North Korea. That's still out there. Okay, we're going to go do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Interestingly enough, there's this article over in Press TV, and it's quoting Dennis Etler. This is an American political analyst, and he's former professor of anthropology at Cabrillo College in Aptos, California. And in an interview with Press TV yesterday, he said the United States has shown that it will go to any length to keep its tenuous hold on global hegemony. And that certainly is a cogent observation, emphasis on any. Because without that global control, the United States is basically finished. We can't compete with manufacturing. We can't compete agriculturally. The only way that the United States can stay in business is to enforce that all commerce comes through the United States using the US dollar. They want to go back to the world of Bretton Woods. That's one of two things that made the United States great after World War II. Was everybody was using the US dollar, and we were the only nation that had not had its industrial base bombed into rubble. Okay. So, but other nations have rebuilt their industry. Some of them have better industry than we do. We had that report, I think, about 2 weeks ago, where this guy at the Pentagon was saying that Chinese and Russian manufacturing represented a strategic threat to the United States. But the United States is in decline. It's been in decline for going on 30 years, and it's accelerating. And everybody's running around trying to pretend that it's just not so. So let's get into some of these war zones. And apparently Amnesty International, along with the monitoring group Air Wars, have done their own study about the number of civilians killed in the Raqqa airstrikes. And they came up with a minimum of 1,600. And that's more than 10 times what the U.S. has been admitting to. Of course, we know that truth is the first casualty of war. And we know this government lies to us about pretty much everything. Corporate media lies to us about everything except the sports scores and the weather, and they're not all that good on the weather. Okay, so over in Iran, the rhetoric is piling on up regarding the end of the waivers for the oil sanctions. Iran was talking about blocking the Strait of Hormuz. And a lot of other countries that are dependent on Iranian oil are very, very nervous. But apparently a senior U.S. administration official, who was not named, said that Donald Trump was confident Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates could fill any gap left in the oil market. So once again, Donald Trump and the United States are out there saying, you will buy your oil from these people, you won't buy your oil from those people. You will buy your steel from this country over here, you won't buy your steel from this country over there. This is nuts. You're making enemies left and right. So anyway, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Abbas Mousavi has said the Islamic Republic of Iran will not allow any country to replace Iran in the oil market. Well, we'll see about that. It's tough talk, but practicality, I'm not sure it's really there. Pepe Escobar is out there sounding a warning that if the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, it will trigger a global depression. Now, yesterday we had a caller into the show who basically came on and said, you know, it's possible that the United States, along with Israel, are trying to drive Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz as a justification for war. And I guess it's something a lot of people are thinking about because there was this YouTube video that came out just today from No More News, I think it was, saying exactly the same thing. They're looking for a reason to have a war with Iran. They've been pounding on Iran and goading Iran and sanctioning Iran, trying to get Iran to do something that the corporate media could say, those dastardly Iranians, and we must go give them what for. Actually, your kids are going to go give them what for, not our kids, you know. And more taxes for the war machine here. Meanwhile, there's a high-level Russian delegation in Iraq discussing trade ties. And this is because Iraq does a lot of trade with Iran. They import a lot of food items from Iran. And they're concerned that that's about to be cut off. So they turn to Russia. I guess it may be they like the idea of GMO-free agricultural produce here. Now, oddly enough, despite all the tough talk about the oil sanctions, the United States has started issuing exemptions to the sanctions that were imposed on Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, basically easing foreign dealings with this military unit, which Washington blacklisted earlier this month. So foreign governments and businesses that have dealings with the IRGC and its affiliates will not be subject to a ban on U.S. travel. Guess they want to get in on some of that economic action there. Story from Brass Check really does say it all. Trump joins the endless war crowd. Now we know who runs this country, at least right now. The defense contractors, as Eisenhower warned us would happen, and the Saudis. Now, for the first time in history, Congress, both parties, voted to stop an illegal war. And Trump vetoed it. Now, the Senate promises they're going to take up Trump's Yemen veto next week, but at this point, they don't think they have the votes for an override, so it's going to be a symbolic gesture. Anyway, over in Iraq, we're seeing the effects of all these weapons that are just poured into these countries, and there's not as much accountability as you'd like to think. They take the stuff in there, it gets stolen, it gets sold. People will train with the weapons and then they'll desert taking the weapons with them. And so there's this tribal conflict in southern Iraq between the Batut and the Hamadna tribes. And it apparently broke out when a police officer from one of the groups tried to arrest a cleric from the other group over some, I think it was a smuggling charge. And this triggered another round of fighting. 3 people have been killed already. What makes this unique is there are so many military people in these 2 tribes. They're using unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, and missiles. Okay. Up in Great Britain, they have added their voice to the chorus of countries that are condemning Russia's decision to grant Russian citizenship for residents of the Donbass. And Russia simply said, we're going to simplify the procedures. You know, there's still some paperwork. You have to go through to get your passport. And a spokesperson of the British Foreign Office said, this step is the latest in a pattern of Russian behavior aimed at threatening Ukraine's security and sovereignty and undermining its territorial integrity. Well, that's another case of being in denial because Donbass does not consider itself part of Ukraine anymore. And there's been a lot of fighting over that very issue. And again, over at the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all people have a right to self-determination. That includes Crimea, that includes Donbass. Meanwhile, also in Great Britain, the Foreign Affairs Committee under the leadership of Tom Tungahat is getting rather bellicose. And they're out there saying it's time for Britain to show global leadership on Turkmenistan's human rights abuses. So I guess Turkmenistan must have some undiscovered natural resources because they're already out there saying, oh, it's human rights atrocities, which is on their little list of handy excuses to use when you want to invade somebody's country. And so they're out there making these comments. And it almost looks like Britain, and indeed much of the Western world, are trying to head back to the age of empires. Little reminder to Britain, when they were out there doing their empire building, they got clobbered in Afghanistan. They wound up slaughtering the Zulu, and they pillaged India. Now, U.S. Special Representative to Venezuela, Elliot Abrams, called for the removal of President Maduro from power and said tens of billions of dollars in foreign investment could pour into the country as a result of his ouster. Basically, it's a bribe. You get rid of Maduro, we could loan you a bunch of money. So Abrams was giving this keynote address to the Atlantic Council, saying in the future, billions of dollars will be invested, note that word, in Venezuela to rebuild the agricultural and industrial sectors. So basically, the end of this game is to take yet another country and plunge them into hopelessly unpayable debt to the central bankers. That's the real agenda. That's what these wars are all about. The Foreign Parliament has approved a multi-billion euro EU defense fund. And apparently this is to support the EU's plans for a European army, which not too long ago was dismissed as a fantasy. This defense fund has been denounced as terrible and highly political by a senior British Armed Forces veteran, saying it's pork barrel spending. It's hard to see. What was that story we had yesterday? The poll found that most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, don't think our government spends their money wisely. All right, there is a new documentary out. It's called The Veto. It has nothing to do with Yemen. It's about corporate media. And this film shows how CNN, Channel 4, and even Al Jazeera participated in faking news reports that dishonestly presented the Syrian government as causing the deaths of children who were actually victims of the Western-financed terrorism that Washington and Israel were using to destroy Syria. Of course, we pointed out how the story that Assad was gassing women and children didn't make any sense to begin with. So we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm just trying to stay up with the headlines. It's actually a very, very busy news day. Okay, so getting on back to the news here. Speaking of fake news, this one is from the BBC, the network that reported the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 26 minutes before it actually happened. And the headline reads how the U.S. military's opium war in Afghanistan was lost. And the story is all about how the United States has spent $1.5 million per day since 2001 fighting the opium war in Afghanistan. Why is business still booming? Well, this story is obviously being put on out there to send the message, we're trying our best. We're trying as hard as we can to stop the opium. But we know that's not true. We know that elements within the U.S. government are themselves involved in the drug trade, most notably the Central Intelligence Agency. So this is another classic case of prostitutes and correspondents feeding you what the government wants you to think is going on. Yes, the opium is pouring into our country, and yes, it's killing a lot of people, but gee shuckies, we're spending $1.5 million a day trying to stop it. What do you expect us to do? I don't know. You could go back to what the Taliban did. If you were caught with an opium poppy, they'd take your hand off. A little draconian, but it did work. The Taliban eradicated opium production in Afghanistan after the Soviets left. Just burned it all down, eradicated it. Which kind of makes you wonder, I mean, the poppies started blooming just as soon as the United States went in there. Where did they get the poppy seeds? Probably not down at the local bakery. Out in Korea, North Korea specifically, Kim Jong-un is accusing the U.S. government of acting in bad faith, and says that the situation on the Korean Peninsula and the region is now at a standstill. It's at a critical point. And Kim said the situation could return to its original state, meaning he's going to go back to building nuclear weapons. And he said the U.S. took a unilateral attitude in bad faith at the recent second DPRK U.S. summit talks. And what Kim is talking about, of course, is this U.S. attitude. You give us what we want first, then maybe we'll do something nice for you. It's a bad habit they picked up from hanging out with the Israelis. And it's not going to work for much of the world, which is why the U.S. attitude is, we've got 200,000 tons of diplomacy to back it up. I hate the idea that we're in a world war, and I think we already are. I think future history books are going to say it was well underway at this point here. We're going to be the bad guys. And it's very frustrating because, a decade ago, when this was cranking up, I said my concern is that 50 years from today, now 40, the U.S. flag, the stars and stripes, will be looked on with as much revulsion as the swastika is today. When you look at what's going on with civilian casualties, with war crimes, with torture, I imagine the corporate media is having a real tough time trying to convince Americans that all of these wars are necessary and that we're just going to have to bear the burdens. And remember what I said about Sun Tzu in The Art of War. Something that any ruler must have to prevail is a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they're willing to bear the hardship that war brings even to the victorious side. And the United States government does not have that. Okay. China just deployed their H-6 bomber in Tibet, just 200 kilometers from the border with Sikkim. And China is still building up its military presence in Tibet and upgrading many airfields for military use. So apparently China has deployed one of its deadliest H-6 bombers in Hoping airfield of the Tibet Autonomous Region. So everybody's moving their pieces around the chessboard. It's amazing. All right, so let's talk about our domestic politics here, because right now the pundits, the experts are saying there are no less than 20 viable contenders for the Democratic nomination. Now, every year, hundreds of people file the paperwork to run for president. But basically, most of them are just ignored by the media. They can't do fundraising. They don't get any poll numbers, and they're basically ignored. But we have 20, the largest field in history. It is crowded. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and it seems we have a caller on the line. So let's go to the phones to Bill in Wisconsin. Aloha, Bill. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Once again, we have the smartest man that ever held position of president in the United States. Somebody that is helping us win. And what he did today, he was asked a question about vaccines. And he said, yeah, everybody should get their vaccines. It's important that we have everybody vaccinated.
What a complete reversal over 2016, where he promised he was going to look into vaccine safety, and then he dropped the vaccine safety ball. And, you know, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is still out there trying to do some good work about that. But again, the entire corporate media, they're on the pro-vaccine message because they need those pharmaceutical advertising dollars.
Yeah, it's incredible. I don't know if I ever mentioned it, but, you know, I'm a county supervisor. They have me on the Board of Health. I was kicked off once, but got back on. And last night I tried to present information on the vaccines that Del Bigtree had out and show a little blurb from one of his shows, and we can't have that. We just can't have that viewed here at a public health meeting. And it's just incredible. And I can come only to one conclusion, that they are involved in a population reduction program in the country. That's it.
There's another possibility out there, okay? Because, I mean, if they wanted a population reduction in this country, they would build that border wall. They're building this population up, and they don't even know what to do with them yet. So there may be something else that's going on that accounts for, you know, the way vaccines are being marketed, the fact that so many products seem to be defective coming right off the store shelves, and that may be that the corporate leadership and political leadership understand there's a big crash coming. And we're in a stage right now of simply plundering ordinary Americans by hook or by crook, you know, by vaccine or by carbon tax, to build up their own little golden parachutes that they're going to use to do a bailout when things really start to go bad. That also makes a great deal of sense. In fact, it makes more sense because, again, if it was population reduction, they'd close that border.
Well, yeah, but in the meantime, we have huge increases in, you know, the kids that have learning disabilities.
Yes.
In all of the so-called public education. And you can tie that to the increase of vaccinations that were given.
It's not just learning disabilities. I mean, the more vaccinations kids are getting, the poorer their health is as they get into adulthood.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a created group of people that the pharmaceutical industry can then milk. And, you know, I've often made the statement that I believe our health program in this country is you pay a lot so that they can kill you.
Yeah, that's certainly one way to put it. And, you know, we had that guy that called in the other day, was just talking about, you know, his poor treatment over there at the VA. And the government really sees this as property. not as human beings deserving of respect. And a big sign of that is this idea. And I think there was somebody, a judge in New York City, who came on out and said, we own you and we can stick needles in you at our discretion. Well, that's something that ranchers do to cattle. And I don't see that as a sign that we're living in any kind of a decent republic. We're living in a dictatorship where you're forced to take certain medications, you're forced to avoid certain other medications like natural herbs. It's an ugly, ugly situation. And public health and safety doesn't really seem to be that much of a concern.
Well, yeah, and I'd agree with you. Now, I have a farm and I raise cattle, but I don't inject my cattle.
Good for you.
Okay. Yeah, we give them, a probiotic, some ginger right at the beginning.
Yep.
If they're born on the farm here, you don't have to give them a damn thing. Okay, and we make sure, that the grain and everything that they eat is of an organic nature. So, I mean, you don't even have to treat cattle bad. So.
Well, we're being treated worse than the cattle then, and it's all marketing. It's all pushing. And everybody involved, they probably have got their stock portfolios loaded up with pharmaceutical stocks. And they're just pumping the market to make themselves richer. Now, we have 300 million people in America, not counting the illegal immigrants. So far, there are only 555 cases of measles, and it's being promoted as an outbreak. Now, a major outbreak, when I hear the word outbreak, I think like, a third of the population.
Right.
I mean, there are so few people.
Brought that up.
Yeah,
I pointed out that I think it was CNN.
Yeah.
And one of the other prostitutes had trouble finding a child with measles, so that they painted up a couple.
They photoshopped the pictures. Yeah. The other one was NBC.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go. Oh, yeah. Well, I had also pointed out, some information on incest, INSYS, a pharmaceutical company that has a fentanyl-based painkiller for cancer patients. And I, I tried to show the connection there of how they were promoting this. They have even, a little blurb that they would show to their salesmen, a rap video, to get them all psyched up so that when they go to visit the doctors, they can get them to take this drug and give it to people. It's supposed to be for cancer patients only, but the doctors were getting kickbacks, and so they were, giving it to everybody that wanted pain reduction. So,
yeah,
it's a sad situation. But,
no, they're getting these people addicted.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for taking my call.
All right, Bill. Well, thank you very much here, and good luck with your cattle. We're going to switch over to Jeff in Canada. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of change the topic a little bit about the, regarding the Christchurch and the Sri Lanka shootings.
Yes.
And a lot of the prominent Democrats have come out, Hillary Clinton, but they've completely depersonalized the Christians and, made it seem like everybody's against the Muslims. So I'll read you Twitter comments from a prominent Democrat. You can judge for how you feel about it.
Okay.
The massacre in Christchurch is the bitter fruit of hatred rooted in racism and religious bigotry. We must stand as one and condemn these attacks on our Muslim brothers and sisters. For those suffering today in New Zealand and around the world, we are with you. Then, regarding the Sri Lanka, the individual said, My heart is with Sri Lanka on this Easter Sunday, with hundreds killed and wounded in a horrific attack as they gathered in prayer on a day devoted to love and peace. May we remember Jesus Christ's message of love for God and for each other as we commit to defeating hate with love. Now, that person completely depersonalized the Christians, like all the other Democrats have.
Yes.
And made it sound like the only bigotry and religious bigotry and racism is essentially from Christians towards Muslims. And I think that is a despicable comment. Those are despicable comments. Guess who made those comments? Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay, well, that's a bit of a surprise.
Not a surprise to me. Because you know what? You look at, she's against the Second Amendment.
Yes.
Okay? That's a fact. She's an environmental extremist. She's for open borders. Okay? Who would want to vote for, what sort of so-called patriot would vote for somebody like that? She does talk the line about being anti-war. Do you think that she's going to be able to get anywhere with that? She's not.
I don't think she's going to survive the primaries, but for that very reason here. And I have to admit, it's an eye opener about Tulsi. I knew about the Second Amendment and the open borders issue. Is there any Democrat currently seen as viable that wants to close the borders? And of course, they could say that they do. I mean, Trump said he was going to close the borders, and so far they're wide open. In fact, it's even worse today.
I'm frustrated with, I agree. Sorry. I agree. I'm very frustrated with some of the things that Trump's done with regard to this sort of thing. But now, look at look who's their front runner now, allegedly. And they say he's higher in the polls than Trump, which is garbage. It's the same crap we heard before. And
Yes.
that is Biden. He's a pervert. Look at the guy. I mean, he's reaching down to young kids and with their, I mean, any father who had any sort of, testicular fortitude whatsoever would beat him would beat him. I would like to see one of these little girls, when he does that, go back with her elbow and slam it full force into his genitals and scream out, "Let me go, pervert." That's what he is. He's a pervert.
Yep.
They have nothing over there. I don't. There's a lot of things I don't like about Trump, but you know what? Compared to the Democrats that are out there, he's a saint. You know what I mean? And I know he's doing a lot of things that are that I don't like. The vaccine's the same thing. I'm always asked by my doctor, "Do you want to take this this shot for this?" And I told him right up front, says, "I'm never going to take a shot for any reason. Never ask me again." And he didn't. It's not going to happen. It's a money-making scam. Here, just think of it. They go and they're completely protected from liability. I mean, what kind of an idiot would take shots? And especially when you take a look at their records of drug companies, of what they do. I mean, who would ever, who would submit to that? It's crazy. Well, that's all I really wanted to say. So,
okay.
I'll just sit back.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. For the phone call. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are open again. Okay, as I mentioned earlier in the program, Donald Trump addressed the National Rifle Association today, and apparently there was somebody in the audience who threw a cell phone at Trump. And you got to be really angry to throw a cell phone away like that, given how costly they are, unless he picks somebody's pockets here. And the individual was arrested, and the president continued without any problem, talking about gun confiscation and so forth. But I think the NRA, probably their main interest is whether they're going to have their tax-exempt status revoked, because that is now being discussed. It's just amazing here. Okay, now, Trump was on Hannity last night and made the comment. He said he's glad he waited, and now we're going to declassify everything. So that whole Russiagate, FBI, FISA thing, they're going to run it up to 2020. And Trump is going to try and spin it his way, and the Democrats are all going to try and spin it that way. So, since we're talking about Joe Biden, and he's off to a rocky start. I think he was #1 in the polls on on name value alone. But he was on The View saying that he's most proud of the Obama administration because there wasn't a single whisper of scandal. Well, Joe, unfortunately, there was the Fast and Furious program. There was the attack on the consulate in Benghazi. There was the IRS targeting conservative groups. There was the unauthorized illegal wiretapping of journalists. There were all the subsidies to Solyndra, which collapsed anyway. There was that Chicago hospital that was tied to Obama. The veterans waiting list, which appears to be something that has not really been totally solved yet. Wild and reckless spending by the General Services Administration, and of course, all the lies about Guantanamo Bay. Now, the reason we didn't hear as much about them is during the Obama administration, the corporate media was just as liberal and left-leaning as it is today. And we've seen that again since Trump took office, where they fed us Russia collusion for almost 2.5 years. Every single day they lied about it. They literally came up with hundreds of completely fantastic stories, all of it fake news. But you hardly ever see an article or a story in the corporate media about, the Uranium One deal, or Charles Ortez investigations into the Clinton Foundation, which shows that if anybody should lose their tax-exempt status, it's the Clinton Foundation. They didn't spend anywhere near enough on charity to qualify as a 501c3. And nothing gets done, and it never gets reported. We're in the middle of a liberal takeover of this country, and it's going to be a disaster because, the liberals are all about socialism, and we're going to have a socialist utopian paradise in this country. Well, maybe you ought to look at some of the other countries that went socialist and how badly they wound up, like the former USSR. Okay, we're going to take another break for commercials. We got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones now, starting with Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike, the Operation Fast and Furious, the Assyrian version was Operation Timber Sycamore. There's no that could have been a scandal if it was ever on the media wanted to let people know about that. But it wasn't, This is basically, it's the same thing what they did in Mexico, arming drug lords.
Yep.
It's the same playbook. Like nothing's like that's why you can figure out these people's like what they do because they have a limited playbook. The same with these overthrows, and there's only so much they can do, and they follow the same guidelines because that's all they can do. But Mike, I wanted to talk. You had a caller from Canada, but did you hear about? I don't know if you talked about with Trudeau going on with the Philippines with Duterte. They got like a recycling shipment, and half of it was garbage.
Yeah, and apparently Duterte is literally threatening war on Canada if Canada doesn't take the trash back. And this is getting to be an issue everywhere on Earth. I mean, China has cut way back on their acceptance of recyclables. And so the stuff is starting to pile up everywhere.
That's because, Mike, when we shipped out stuff to China, in their recyclables, there was linoleum and baby diapers and stuff. They don't want that crap. This was like from a few years ago. That there was, China just stopped taking our stuff, but it's piling up in Canada and over here. I didn't know this, Mike, but Canada, they have the cleanest cities in the West probably. But they use more, their garbage, they use more garbage than we do, and their population is less.
Yes.
How is that possible? I don't understand how that's possible.
Well, there's the beginnings of an effort here in the United States to sort of pull back on how much trash we generate. Here in Hawaii, they've banned plastic bags at the supermarket. if you're desperate for one, they'll sell one to you, but everybody's pushing reusing these cloth reusable shopping bags. The problem with that is that as there's contamination from the food products into the fabric of the bag, they become breeding grounds for bacteria, and in turn they're turning into a health hazard as well.
Okay, man, I'm going to switch gears to on RT. I usually watch the Rick Sanchez, but now I guess he's on vacation at Salzburg, I think his name is. He had Maria, I talked about this before, Maria Conchito Gonzalez on there. She was in the Predator, no, she was in the Running Man, remember?
Yes.
She's a Spanish woman. And she left, her family left Venezuela at 5 years old, when she was 5 years old. And she is saying we should invade Venezuela. Like, we need to help the RP. Like, she's not even there anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know who she's working for. One of these think tanks or something, but, or the CIA. I don't know, but she was always against, like, Chavez and this whole thing. And you know what's sad, Mike? Like, she can't figure this out. We put sanctions on them, and we have this oil war against them. Like, that's what... If you lift the sanctions and let the oil prices float, because that's what capitalism is, right? Letting things float the way they should be.
Yes.
Not manipulating things. Then Venezuela could get by. But what we're doing is we're putting sanctions on them. Russia, can't do business with them, with this, with that.
Okay, Dustin, got to put you on hold. We've got to do a station identification break. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're still talking with Dustin in New Jersey. And we're talking about how there is a problem that is building up in the world from all this disposable that. It's piling up. There are some environmental groups trying to call attention to it. But again, it's something that generally doesn't make the corporate media. And I think what we're seeing here, there's always been talk about how the theocratic state would give away to the nation state, but that eventually the nation state would give away to the corporate state. And I think we're well along with that transition. And what we're seeing here is basically corporate greed at work. They have seized control of the civil government. They're keeping it around for vestigial reasons or ceremonial reasons. But the corporations are calling the shots, which is shove vaccines at people, sell the people disposable products, and don't worry about where it's going to go. It's the corporate ruled world is going to be a very, very ugly place, and you don't need to see Rollerball to know that.
Are depleted uranium shells recyclable?
No, that's kind of the leftover waste from enriching uranium for nuclear bombs. That was piling up, and so the idea was, well, we'll make shells out of it, and we'll make our radioactive waste problem Iraq's radioactive waste problem. I mean, we're at a point right now where we're just shoving waste onto other countries as quickly as we can.
So, Mike, back on Venezuela, like, I always look at them like they're all starving to death. That's what they keep telling us, right? Well, how long has it been? Is there anybody left in Venezuela walking around at this point? Like, if everybody's starving to death,
Well, there are some journalists down there who keep going into the supermarkets and are showing the shelves are full and there are people in there buying stuff. So again, this is part of the sales campaign. Oh, we have to go in and save those poor people of Venezuela from the evil tyrant Maduro. We heard the same song in Syria. It's a lie, people. Venezuela at one point was one of the most wealthy countries in South America. And then when Hugo Chavez became their leader, and he was a socialist, and he had this radical idea that Venezuela's wealth ought to be spent on the people of Venezuela, and the money junkies couldn't really deal with that. So Venezuela is in the economic condition that it's in following literally, years and years of economic warfare, very covert economic warfare. And again, that's not reported by the corporate media. And now, of course, they're ramping up the pressure with these sanctions on Venezuelan oil. And this is the U.S. being bullied to the world.
That's the thing, Mike. You know how they always say, well, they have sporadic power outages? People don't forget, we have sanctions on these countries for a long time. If you don't do what we want, we'll put... sanction after sanction after sanction, and then they wonder why they have power outages. It's because of our... Lift all the sanctions. I thought Trump was a capitalist. I thought he believed in the free market.
He believes in being a billionaire, unfortunately, and there is a difference. Because billionaires tend to get to a mindset of reaping huge amounts of money out of the society without really needing to put anything of substantial benefit back on in. Getting on back to the blackouts in Venezuela, first of all, we get blackouts here all the time in Hawaii. And it's been pretty much determined at this point, those were hack attacks against Venezuela's power outage to try and put more pressure on Maduro.
And Mike, real quick, if I got some time, there was if you can go on YouTube, look up Denver truck crash. There was a horrible truck crash
I saw
in Denver.
that. I saw that.
Mike, did you know this guy? Like, you need a CDL license. Can you be like a non-citizen and get because they said he was just a resident of Texas. They didn't say he was a citizen of this country because what they're saying is, the guy spoke hardly any English. They needed a translator. Because I was watching the sheriff, and they said that he spoke some English, but not much. So I'm wondering, do you need a CDL license if you're a non? Like, can you have one if you're a non? Because that's what I'm wondering.
I don't know. That would be up to the Colorado DMV, I guess.
No,
in any event, this truck driver is facing charges, and again,
he's from Texas, Mike.
I'm sorry. Texas. I'm sorry. I thought there was a big crash out in Denver.
Yeah, it was, but his CDL is from Texas.
Oh,
he's
okay.
A resident, that's where. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just curious, if anybody is a truck driver out there because I saw that video and that truck was obviously he was going too fast. But Mike, that's all I have to say. Have a good rest of the show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network and go to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It's actually good. I kind of followed Dustin. Hope he's doing well. First of all, I was going to mention something about polls, but I'm going to. That poll putting Joe Biden ahead of Trump. Come on, Mike. There were less than 2,000 people.
Yes.
Involved in that. I mean, that's like 0.00003 or 4% of the population of the United States. That's insane. There's a guy that works. Well, he's on the CBC all the time. He's been involved with the Hillary Clinton stuff, with the United States, POTUS race, bunch of crap all up here in Canada, and he's always wrong.
Yes.
He's wrong every single time he makes a prediction, and yet he still gets paid to write this stuff. Right?
Yeah, that's what he's paid to do, is to misinform the public.
Eric Grenier. So, and then this garbage thing with Canada.
Yes.
You know what, Mike? We're pigs. Plain and simple. You don't have to pay for garbage removal unless you have more than 2 or 3 bags outside of a house. The green garbage bags.
Yes.
But if you think about it, a lot of people eat out of a box and a bag.
Yes.
And, so there's going to be a lot of waste that cannot break down because it's wax coated or plastic coated paper, cardboard.
Whatever happened to biodegradable packaging? I mean, that was the big thing back 10 years ago, and
yep.
Where the stuff would simply dissolve back into something that was good for the environment. and I guess some corporate executive said, yeah, it's going to cost us too much to make, and that's going to raise the prices. The customers are never going to go for it. I imagine they'd go for it now. And by the way, I did get an email saying Canadians create more garbage because of our motto, wherever we go, we throw. And it is an issue. And you know, when Claire and I, we rarely get down to the beach, even though we live on this island. But when we do, there's always stuff just floating in the water. And, you know, they do try and sweep the area in front of the tourist areas clean, you know, with nets. But there are other places where it's just piling on up.
Oh yeah, you would see a lot of garbage if you know, if it's going to float. It would be insane.
Yep.
You know, where you are. I mean,
but even if it sinks, it can harm the sea life. And we're coming up on a period where there are going to be food shortages. Our growing seasons are getting shorter. We've toxified the Gulf of Mexico. Nobody around here trusts any seafood from over by Japan, although by this time I'm sure it's spread all over the Pacific. So you finally reach a point where you say,
I don't, yeah, what's left? Of course, a lot of up here in Canada, we have a lot of greenhouses.
Yes.
And as you know, I bet you any money you know, when you start getting into like growing outside in the dirt and do this as a like you're a farmer, one of the first things to go is magnesium.
Yes.
In the soil, and it's a very important metal because it actually has a calming effect.
Yes.
And so, you know, that's one of the first things to go. And of course, when you're talking greenhouses, what are they going to do? They're going to make this stuff as cheap as possible, right, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
So they're probably not going to make sure that it's actually, you know, has all these vitamins and nutrients that it should have.
No, generally they won't. They're basically going to put in whatever chemicals are going to make the plants grow fast and get to market quickly, things like carbon dioxide. Again, it's all dominated by the making of money. And it's led to some...
That's all it ever comes down to.
Well, you know, it used to be that government would try and exercise some oversight to basically look at the long view and say, is what this corporation doing going to cause harm down the road? And then they would work to maybe, you know, kind of ameliorate that. These days, it's just anything goes attitude. Whatever a corporation wants to do. We're still having this big fight down on Maui over GMO test fields because they test the unapproved GMO crops out here. And I guess the thinking is if they make a mistake, well, it's just Hawaii.
Yeah. Just another thing really quickly, Mike. Think about all the recycled plastic there is.
Yes.
I throw everything plastic into a plastic bag and have it recycled. That plastic has to go somewhere. And it's coming right back at us again.
Well, a big part of the problem is that with China now...
like bags and everything else.
It's now that with China refusing to take in any more recycled plastics, and, you know, apparently the Philippines has had their fill of it as well, it is being just brought back. And we have these recycling center down here at the bottom of the hill. And all they do is they collect it up and they're paying back the deposit fees on the bottles and everything. But then it goes from there to a landfill because they've got no place to send it.
Yep.
It sort of reminds me.
The problem with plastic is when you melt it.
Yeah.
The problem with plastic is in order to melt it back into something that's viable, it's a really serious, you know, all that stuff's got to be washed and shredded. It has to be sorted.
Yes.
You know. It's not cheap.
No, it's never really penciled out, unfortunately. It's never penciled out.
Well, that's the problem. China, they work so cheaply that we'll send it over there because, if we can't afford to deal with this stuff ourselves. Guess what? Not only in the United States, but in Canada now, too. The bell's ringing, right? We've reached the end. We have to deal with this stuff. You can't just bury it, leave it for 20 years, throw a bunch of soil on it, leave it for 20 years, and then build, a survey on top of it. There's going to be repercussions. You're polluting the groundwater, number one.
You absolutely are.
But, these, Mike, you cannot tell me that these people are actually this stupid.
No, they're not stupid people. They just don't care. They're focused on their stock portfolios. They're focused on their own quality of life, and for everybody else, that's the classic pattern of a sociopath. They are oblivious to the harm their actions cause other people. It's just I've got mine, and that's all I care about.
And it seems that one of them is sitting in the White House.
Yep.
And there's another one up here sitting in Ottawa.
Yep. It is the curse of political
thanks a lot,
power.
Mike, for your time.
It is the curse of... My turn. It's the curse of political power that attracts the very sort of people who should not be allowed to have it. So anyway, Al, thanks an awful lot.
Thank you very much.
We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, what's on my mind is, Dustin just was on talking about guy Steve Malzberg on RT.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on with RT. I've seen him on there before. I'm hoping he's just substituting for a few days for Rick Sanchez, who I think is really great. But this guy is a neocon of neocons, Malzberg. I remember him when I was living in New York, and he was on at WABC Talk Radio, and he was, he kind of like Sean Hannity, and a dumber version of Sean Hannity, and that's this guy Malzberg. I really don't, he was all for the Iraq War. He was all for just about any American intervention you could think of, other than thinking, well, we got to hit them harder. We got to go in there and, destroy them. Pretty much this is the neocon attitude, So I'm surprised. I don't know what's going on with RT. Maybe they figured they want to diversify a little to show that they're being fair. But this guy, this guy's really bad news.
I would say possibly the first one, that Russia Today, in order to not find itself blocked off, as has happened to some other foreign information providers, that they're sort of making compromises, because RT still does put out a lot of really good news. But here's the good news, okay? People are picking up on it. They know they can't just trust an entire news network. They have to just take it piece by piece. Is this guy making sense? Is he, obviously shining us all on? And you just turn him off at that point.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been doing. I like to watch 7 o'clock. A lot of times, if I'm home, watch 7 p.m. Rick Sanchez, because he's very good,
Mm-hmm.
But I see this clown, forget it. I turn it right off. But I'm just hoping that Sanchez didn't run into some kind of problems. And so here, I'm hoping maybe he's like on vacation for a few days.
Yep.
That's why I was, got interested when Dustin was talking about it. But this guy Malzberg, like I said, you talk about a neocon. He is about his neocon. Everything, because Israel can't do any wrong. No war is a bad war. And like you said, he was basically encouraging invasion of Venezuela by having somebody on that in favor of it. So this guy is a dirtbag, and I really like
there are a lot of them out there, unfortunately, and I think probably a lot of us are realizing that the world is becoming a very evil, nasty place, and there are way too many people who are willing to trade their dignity, their morality, their ethics in exchange for a promotion, a bigger paycheck, or that moment of fame. You know, they'll get up there and say whatever they think the guy with the camera wants to hear, and they'll say it just to get on the camera.
But the thing is about Malzberg, he is so bad that even the neocon stations don't want him on, because that's why he goes from one thing to the other. And then I think he went on Newsmax, and evidently Newsmax doesn't even want him. So then I start seeing him at times substituting. Not really. I see him coming on Crosstalk once in a while. But in Crosstalk, they know how to check him, because he's usually another 2 or 3 people there that keep him in line, you know. Mm-hmm. And then I see he's taken over Sanchez, at least temporarily. I just hope it's not permanently, you know. That would be a big mistake by RT, I think. It really would.
Yeah, it would be. You know.
You know who I'm talking about? Do you know who this guy is?
Not really. I mean, I've heard the name.
One might want to look him up as Malzberg, you know, with an M.
Okay.
Malzberg, you know. All right, Mike. That's about all I wanted to say. You know, there's a lot of other things going on, but I'm just wondering what's going on with RT. That's all. I thought maybe you knew.
Well, I imagine
Sanchez.
There is a full court press to try and get all of the media under control and in compliance with the official story. And what can I tell you? We live in a world of lies. It's like a real-life matrix. Okay, Mark, we're going to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, RBN needs your help. WhatReallyHappened.com needs your help. Things are going, unfortunately, from bad to worse. And first of all, thanks to everybody who has helped. Thanks to everybody who has donated. And for those of you who have not donated, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can call and become a recurring subscriber or pledge a credit card or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. All right, so we're going to go back to the phones here to Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, you're talking about pollution, and my daughter's into environmental medicine, and I've talked to other people that are big in that field. They say that most of our toxins come from the air. I would have thought it was the food with glyphosate and the water with all that. They say no, the air. And a baby born today has approximately, depending upon give or take, 250 toxic chemicals in its body at birth that weren't there 200 years ago. You know, back then they didn't have any.
Yep.
So that's a bad omen for what's, our future is. And I got to say that yesterday you kind of stunned me a little bit on a different topic. You said President Trump was getting rid of the Section 8 housing for illegal aliens.
Yep.
And it stunned me because I didn't know they had it in the beginning. I said,
neither
illegal
did I.
aliens are getting Section 8 housing?
Yep.
Section 8 housing, you have to put an application in and prove that you don't have your money and you get on a waiting list for a year to get that. And I have to agree that, more effective than a wall would be cut off the incentive for those people to come here. And a lot of times people go back home. A lot of people went back to Mexico and they couldn't find anything up here after they crashed the border.
Yep.
So, but my other thought there on that was, the globalists have probably already won. I mean, that doesn't mean we stop fighting them, but to have all this stuff from the top come down, from the top down, these people don't agree with what they have to do, but it's their job. They have to, and if they don't, they don't have a job anymore. So that starts at the top and sent down, and some of it's so ridiculous. Anyway, Mike, I just had those thoughts and appreciate your insight on it, and we'll talk to you some other time.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And no, prior to that article coming out, I didn't know that illegal immigrants were eligible for Section 8 housing assistance. Getting on back to our domestic politics here, Biden has obviously kicked over a hornet's nest by coming on in to the 2020 campaign, and everybody seems to be piling onto him. And the slogan is turning into anyone but Biden. So there's this, these liberal groups that are out there saying anyone but Biden. I'm wondering how much of this pile on to him is coming from Hillary. Now, obviously, the other 19 so-called viable candidates, they're all going to attack him. He's number one. That makes him a target, and they're just going to knock him off here. And Biden really, again, he's off to a rough start, because when he did that little video announcing his campaign, he claimed that Donald Trump basically said the white nationalists were really fine people, which, as it turns out, Trump had not said that. There had been a qualifier. But unfortunately, in liberal politics, truth doesn't matter. We're going to say whatever gets you to do what we want. And boy, if that isn't a good definition of living in a dictatorship, I don't know. And they're giving Biden the Kavanaugh treatment already. They've gone back to Anita Hill. She's getting a little FaceTime on TV. Now, Anita Hill, if you will remember, accused Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas of sexual harassment all the way back in 1991, testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee, which was led by Joe Biden. And Anita Hill is being paraded around saying she still can't support Biden in his bid to become president. And it's not that Biden sexually harassed her. She just doesn't feel that he was enough on her side. All right, so we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And getting on back to Joe Biden. Joe Biden has hired political strategist Symone Sanders as a senior aide to his campaign. Now, Sanders has previously declared, quote, "We don't need white people leading the Democratic Party right now," end quote. And Sanders made the comments shortly after Trump won the presidential election in 2016. And the opinion, odd in that she'd been a spokeswoman for the campaign of Bernie Sanders, was in response to the prospect of Howard Dean becoming the DNC chairman. So the country is breaking up. The Democrats are now saying, we're the party of everybody who isn't white. That's their electoral base here. And that's why they're working so hard to keep that border open. Just loaded up with non-white people here. Now, a while back, Rahm Emanuel retired early, stepped down. The stated reason, he wanted to be with his family, which is something that people who retire unexpectedly always seem to say here. But there may be something else. There's a story that came out of N-Alert Blogspot speculating, and it is speculating, that Rahm Emanuel was caught on an FBI wiretapped phone call with Alderman Ed Burke. Now, if you remember, Ed Burke was in this huge corruption case that rocked City Hall in the middle of the campaign season. And it was all hushed up at the time. He's about to be indicted now, today, or actually the prosecutors are asking for additional delay, and the deadline would be June the 7th. But basically, it's this investigation for massive corruption And even though this guy was, being charged with corruption, he still won re-election as an alderman. Hey, it's the Chicago way. What can I tell you? All right. Apparently, new text from former FBI Special Agent Peter Strzok and former FBI Attorney Lisa Page reveal the pair had discussed attempts to recruit sources within the White House to spy on the Trump administration. And Senate Appropriations Committee Chairman Charles Grassley and Senate Homeland Security Committee Chairman Ron Johnson revealed the information in a 3-page letter. And apparently this information had been divulged to several sources, by several sources to the news site last week. And some of the people that were named in those text messages have already issued public statements saying, I was never contacted by them. I did my job properly when I was in the Trump White House here. Okay, information clearing. You know something? I'm running short on time. I'm going to skip this story. It's basically a rehash of why are we not seeing all the people who were involved in all of this spying and the FISA shenanigans. She infiltrated. Okay, you've probably heard of an organization called the Satanic Temple, and they're famous for going around to various places that have Christian symbols on them or in front of them and demanding equality under the First Amendment to put up a statue of Satan. And it's being seen that it really is primarily a political movement. It's the perfect religion for progressives, and leftists and liberals are flocking to it. You can believe anything you want as long as you hate what Donald Trump, Christians, and conservatives believe. Now, the Satanic Temple, unlike other satanic religions, doesn't even believe in a supernatural entity called Satan. Basically, they're using him as a symbol of the ultimate rebel, and they're out there to basically upset Christians everywhere that they can. They've been around since 2013, and they openly tell people who are joining, the only real requirement for joining is to believe in the political and secular actions of the group. So it is a political group that's calling itself by a quasi-religious name. Even so, the Internal Revenue Service officially recognized the Satanic Temple as a church, which means they are now going to get the same benefits accorded to other religious organizations, including tax exemptions to non-discrimination protections. Boy, they're really pulling out all the stops. Now, Chelsea Manning had filed an appeal over her being imprisoned for civil contempt. Now, she was hauled before a grand jury investigation into WikiLeaks. She refused to testify against Assange. She was held in prolonged solitary confinement for around 27 days before authorities at the William G. Truesdale Adult Detention Center moved her into the general population. Now, judges for the appeals court who rejected her appeal offered no explanation as to why they believed a lower court committed no error in finding Manning in civil contempt. They also provided no reasons for why they were justified to keep Manning in jail. So Manning's attorneys are out there issuing a statement saying basically they affirmed the district court's finding of contempt and denied Chelsea Manning's motion for release on bail. Neither decision included any legal reasoning or explanation for the court's conclusions. Well, obviously what's happening is they're trying to break her and get her to turn on Julian Assange, and it may well be that without Chelsea Manning betraying Julian Assange, they may not really have a case against him. Now, Edward Snowden came on out with a message basically saying that Assange's arrest and the Mueller report clearly shows a two-tiered system of justice. Well, we already knew about that from the Uranium One deal. And Assange's arrest and the handling of his arrest is revealing even more corruption than WikiLeaks itself did. And I understand that he is being kept in isolation. He's not being allowed to talk to his family or any member of his friends or even his lawyers. Now, he's still in prison over in Great Britain, so I don't know what the laws are over there. But I know here in the United States of America, it would be considered a crime, actionable, to not deny access to an attorney. This was an article that came out on countermarkets.com, and it was written by Brittany Hunter, and it says, "No one is coming to rescue you, especially not a presidential candidate." And she starts out saying, we're only a few months into 2019 and already the 2020 presidential election season is well underway. I was making that comment the other day. And basically saying nearly every single person has an opinion about who this country should be supporting, and nearly every single one of them believes their lives will be significantly better or worse based on who occupies the White House. This unfortunately gives presidential candidates far too much power. And she recommends that in order to truly better our lives, we need to rely less on political talking heads and more on ourselves. Only then can we begin to make a bigger difference and change the world. And boy, do I agree with that. So let's talk about the economic news here. Last year, there was this Saudi investment summit, and global finance leaders boycotted it over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Well, they're not boycotting the summit this year. They're back in Riyadh rather. Claire's laughing at me. Rented lips. So all of these Wall Street bankers and financial people, they're in Riyadh despite the beheading of 37 people this week. So apparently they were cool with that. So they're looking to build financial opportunities with Saudi Arabia. And I can understand why. First of all, they want to make money. Second of all, there's a real issue with countries that are quasi-friendly with the United States starting to slide over to Russia. And so this may be a bit of an outreach to sort of keep Saudi Arabia economically linked with the United States. So that's the game that's being played here. Meanwhile, Putin has arrived in China. He's taking part in the One Belt, One Road International Forum, which kicked off today and will end on Sunday. The forums are 3 working sessions, are scheduled for today, and Putin will address one of them. So again, he knows where the future lies, and he wants to get Russia involved with it. Now today we heard that the economy grew by 3.2% annual growth rate, the GDP. That came out of the Commerce Department. And of course, Trump is already out there tweeting out, huzzah, huzzah, the economy's doing really good. But apparently, according to this article that came out of MarketWatch, on the outside, it looks good, like a big, shiny new car. But if you lift the hood, you see a fragile one-cylinder engine, because the real economy, the heart of the real economy, private sector consumption and investment slowed to 1.3% annual rate, the slowest in nearly 6 years. Business investment also slowed to 2.7% from 5.4%. The numbers used to say gross domestic product are all coming out from the stock market, which we all know is being manipulated and used as a political banner, apparently now also by Donald Trump. Dr. Lacey Hunt is out there saying the U.S. economy will continue to decline for the balance of 2019. And let's see, QE and plunge protection continue. More store closings are continuing. The Baltic Dry Index continues to drop. Cryptos have tumbled. New York's Attorney General has alleged the operator of the Bitfinex cryptocurrency trading platform and the issuer of the Tether stablecoin lost $850 million, which it subsequently covered up using funds from an affiliated stablecoin operator, Tether. In other words, they engaged in commingling of client and corporate funds to cover the shortfall. They were hoping they were going to be able to hide that, but Bitfinex has long been rumored to be a mechanism to prop up various virtual currencies. Now, Trump's tax bill was heralded, we're going to lower taxes, and it was a boon for the ultra-rich and for corporations. The Center for Public Integrity has revealed that Trump's new tax bill allows twice as many companies to pay zero taxes. And we've commented on this show, we've had a lot of people calling in and commenting on some of America's wealthiest corporations, like Amazon, seem to come away with no taxes at all. And now many of the country's largest publicly held corporations, basically, on this year's tax return, they said they owe absolutely nothing on the billions of dollars in profits they earned last year. Okay, we're going to take a phone call here. John in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. Another good show as usual.
Thank you.
I just wanted to comment very, very quickly on your discussion with one of your previous callers, Bill from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And this had to do with the implementation of vaccines as posited by Bill, that their purpose is to essentially kill people in the long run, and I have to say that I agree with him on that in that respect. You countered with the idea, well, then how does opening up the borders and allowing more people to come in allow for a global population reduction? We're just getting more people. And I would just like to say, and that's not a bad thing. I had to think about it a little bit myself. So what I would say is that at this late state in the globalist plans, Mike, I don't think any of us really can say with any real determination what the timing is on any of this. If they succeed in getting more nationalities in here that don't have our culture and language, and maybe even some races that don't share our various moral beliefs or whatever, and it causes foment and dissension,
yep,
they will have succeeded in that regard. And if they still get everything they need in terms of vaccinations, they'll have succeeded in that regard. If they get Ben Carson, someone like Dr. Ben Carson, that everyone reveres as a doctor, he's already pronounced he's in favor of not only vaccines for children and newborn babies, but also all adults, everybody.
Yes.
So,
and now they're pushing vaccines for dogs.
Yeah, and then the last point, Michael, regarding that discussion is that I'm sure you know better, at least as well as I do, that they're behind schedule. They instituted the Agenda 21 at the Rio de Janeiro UN conference in 1992, and they had to change it this century. That's how old we all are, to Agenda 2030. So they're behind in that regard. They still don't have an international treaty with the UN for small arms elimination, in spite of all these alleged school shootings, quote unquote school shootings, and so I think that's really holding up their plans.
Okay, well, John, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the economic news coming up here on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog: World trade falls most since financial crisis, hit by China and other emerging Asian nations. They're basically beating us at manufacturing. The United States is an empire in decline. There was that interesting comment about how the United States is struggling against the tide of history. And how far are they willing to go? And apparently they're willing to go all the way. Now, Warren Buffett, who owns a print media empire that includes the Buffalo News and the Omaha World Herald, he says most newspapers are toast. The advertising rates are in decline. The readership is in decline. And so he's saying the world has changed hugely, and he doesn't think newspapers are a viable investment anymore. Of course, most newspapers these days are being run at a loss, basically in order to control the narrative that's out there on the newsstands. Story coming out of Finance and Yahoo: 39 million Americans can't afford a summer vacation. So this is according to a new bank rate survey, and said 39 million Americans won't be taking a summer vacation. They simply cannot afford one. So the factor, of course, is cost. Vacations typically cost just under $2,000 on average. That's going to hit us hard here in Hawaii. All right, immigration. Apparently over 1,000 migrants break out of a southern Mexico detention center. And it's basically showing Mexico is not able to handle this situation either. Meanwhile, we've got the mother of all caravans headed for our border. 10,000 migrants are expected to arrive in Mexico City this week on their way to our border. Now, interestingly enough, there is this story where down in New Mexico, they have declared a local emergency because all of the Border Patrol checkpoints on the highways are basically closed. Last month, the Department of Homeland Security moved the checkpoint agents to the border to help process the crush of migrant asylum seekers. And so now people are just driving straight on through these Border Patrol checkpoints, and the New Mexico county is concerned. It's wide open door for gun runners and drug lords. And by the way, my apologies to Afghanistan. According to the drug czar Jim Carroll, 93% of the street heroin in the United States comes from Mexico. It's just this insane policy. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification. When we come back, we'll be joined by the lovely Lady Claire. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who likes to join us on our third hour every Friday with her unique perspective on the world. So take it away, Claire.
Well, I was rather surprised.
Whoops, probably I would help if I turned up your microphone.
Yes, please turn up my mic. Thanks, honey.
Okay.
There was this very alarming article in Blacklisted News, and normally they don't do articles like this, but it didn't quite pass the smell test, and I'd like your opinion on it. And the title was Communist Chinese Embedding Spies in Cancer Centers to Steal U.S. Government-Funded Cancer Research.
Well, I imagine there's a great deal of espionage going on over there.
Yeah.
There you are. We're all set.
You think about jobs that service society, and cancer research certainly is one of them that's very near the top.
Not when you take into account the fact that most cancer treatments are a racket.
Oh, I know,
Yeah.
I know. But apparently 2 tenured scientists at a renowned cancer center hospital in the U.S. were recently fired because of their involvement in a Chinese action to steal American research. Now, they haven't really come up with a smoking gun here, and I'm kind of wondering if they are just getting rid of these researchers just to get rid of them, or if this whole thing is more of a demonization in China.
It could very well be.
Yeah.
But again, research costs.
Mhm.
There we are.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, the research does cost a lot.
It does.
And unfortunately, everybody spies on everybody, and it's not just China.
Yeah.
But so again, this is focused basically on, you know, we're going to accuse China of this as part of the ramp up to increase tensions.
Yeah, the ongoing demonization.
Which does not mean they didn't do it,
Yeah.
because China is renowned for violating intellectual property.
Oh, remember what happened with my music? Island
Yeah.
Sanctuary, that was funny.
Yeah, when
You should
Claire
share.
produced her first record album,
Mhm.
and that's when we lived over on the other side of the island.
Hmm.
And I come down, we were producing the album, and it was all on the computers and everything. And we come on down, and we found that somebody had gotten into her music computer and was downloading all of the finished tracks for the album.
I hope they at least liked it. I mean, they probably were selling it on the street for pennies on the dollar.
That might explain why we couldn't sell all that many of them.
Yeah, yeah. And in the time ahead, I would love to see countries not charging at each other, but working together. And as you mentioned earlier, Mike, it is unfortunate that a cure for cancer is an economic game stopper. Treatments that keep the patient having to take whatever it is over a long period of time, potentially bankrupting that person and their family, the family they care about.
Oh, absolutely.
That's become standard operating procedure.
Goldman Sachs came on out and said curing patients is a bad business model. And I get a little irked all the time to see these ads for these charities saying, we're searching for a cure for whatever.
Yeah, fill
it
in
is.
the blank.
And you know that's not what they're doing. They're funding more research into treatments. Nobody's looking for a cure for cancer. A cure for cancer would break the entire medical industrial complex. Nobody wants a cure for AIDS. They just want treatments that you have to get over and over and over again.
Yeah. But I keep thinking, for example, we get earthquakes in the U.S. They get earthquakes in China and also in Iran. What if the top scientists who are geological specialists could help us determine how to make building material that is more withstanding but still light and not giving a problem to the environment? I would love to see people collaborating and not scratching at each other.
Actually, a lot of that research has already been done. The problem is everything they've come up with increases the cost of construction.
Yeah.
And again, with profitability and answering to your stockholders, the top priority for these companies, they want to stay in business.
Okay.
And so, as a matter of fact, yeah, I mean, the technology is out there to accomplish amazing and wonderful things. It's just that nobody wants to pay for it.
Yeah, yeah,
They'd rather build a bigger bomb.
Yeah, or a shorter bridge, whatever. Speaking of pharmaceuticals and etc., apparently a large pharma exec perp was walked in handcuffs after surrendering on opioid trafficking charges. This is wild. Now, the guy is the former CEO of the nation's 6th largest pharmaceutical distributor, and he got perp walked in handcuffs on Tuesday after he was indicted on 2 counts of criminal conspiracy related to drug trafficking in opioids. I don't know what this man and the man around him were thinking. The guy's name is Lawrence Dowd III, and what does that the third mean? It means that he comes from money, okay? And he became the first pharmaceutical executive in the United States to face prosecution linked to the opioid crisis after he was accused, along with another company executive, of ignoring red flags while pushing massive hauls of powerful painkillers to pharmacies across the United States.
Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And again, it's wanting to intentionally addict American patients.
For money.
Yeah. Yeah. To keep on sucking money out of them.
Yeah. And apparently, this is through ABC, Dowd is facing a mandatory minimum of 10 years in prison if he gets convicted.
Which for a 75-year-old, that probably amounts to a life sentence.
Or a death sentence, depending on how you're going to put it. And I think, and Mike, if you differ with me here, let me know. I would not bet necessarily on a jail sentence of any kind. And here's why. Because the rich and the moneyed rarely eat their own. Mr. Dowd III, definitely among the rich. If this is a trial by jury, the lawyers for the defendants are going to be cherry picking that courtroom jurors to get the best possible outcome for their client. Think O.J. Simpson and the Dream Team.
Yes.
But I would be willing to bet a whole 2 cents American. That's not going to happen. He's not going to see jail time because of his age and because of the expertise that lawyers have in defending people like this.
You know, there are entire law firms that do nothing but go through the jury selection process.
Yeah.
And they'll amass databases on the potential jurors.
Oh, yeah.
There was a movie, Gene Hackman and Runaway Jury.
Yes, I remember
that actually
that one.
detailed all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, we actually did this one.
Oh, okay.
So,
alrighty.
Let's skip on down to your next story.
Okay.
Okay, boy, it's a big one.
Yeah. And I would like to go back to this for a minute, Mike, and I definitely want your opinion on this. Okay, the drop-dead date for the oil waivers against Iran, China, India, and Turkey, all of those importers whose waivers will expire on 2 May.
Yes.
What's going to happen? What does President Trump think he's going to do? You know, and
well, Turkey's obviously very upset.
Yeah.
They're saying that Trump had assured them the waivers would continue.
Yeah.
Iraq is apparently looking at doing more business with Russia. And again, this is the United States throwing its weight around. And it's a bad direction. It is a bad direction.
Oh, go ahead.
So I was going to say,
yeah,
they obviously want war with Iran.
Yep.
The U.S. literally wants to rule the world. And so far, it's going very badly.
Very badly. And the way that you will know how badly it's going is when we see the reinstitution of a draft.
Well, at least they have decided, well, there's that lawsuit that's still going through the courts that a male-only military registration is unconstitutional because it discriminates on the basis of sex.
Yeah.
But they're definitely talking about it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And getting over to technology, there is a hacker who says he can kill your car's engine while you're still driving. Not a really good idea.
Well, ours just,
Pardon?
When we had the Honda,
yes,
that would stop just all by itself.
Yes. And apparently a hacker has recently demonstrated that he could access 2 popular vehicle monitoring apps that let him monitor where other people's cars were located. Even worse, access the driver's private information and even kill the engines remotely. Apparently, these 2 apps are called iTrack and ProTrack that companies can use to monitor their fleets of vehicles according to Motherboard. The attack, which the hacker said he did to draw attention to flimsy cybersecurity, serves as a cautionary tale to double-check your security practices. All 27,000 plus compromised accounts use the default password 123456. Folks, never, ever.
I use that password on my luggage.
That's why we keep losing it. Okay. The hacker could also monitor each driver on a map view, just as an employer might. Both apps come with a kill engine button that turns off a car if it is traveling less than 12 miles per hour, which the hacker told Motherboard he didn't touch out of safety concerns. And he made a statement, I can absolutely make a big traffic problem all over the world. I have full control. Mike, that's pretty scary.
That is very scary. Now, again, these are apps that are used to monitor fleet vehicles, possibly rental fleet vehicles.
Yeah.
If you just bought your car as a private sale from a car dealer or a used car lot or something like that, and you own it, then this shouldn't be an issue. There shouldn't be an iTrack or ProTrack embedded in there.
I agree. And
one qualifier, though.
Okay.
You need to go back and check, if you buy a used car, check the Carfax,
yes.
and it'll tell you the previous owners. And if one of those previous owners was a rental company, then there could be an issue.
Yes. Now, it was interesting. The hacker said that he demanded a ransom from the two companies, but that he was mostly interested in advocating for their customers. Piling it higher and deeper, are we?
Yes.
Hello. So just please, and they used a phrase, Mike, gray hat.
Yes.
And what, for people who maybe don't get into the depths of computers, what exactly does that mean, please?
Well, when hacking became widely known and was taken over by the cyber criminals, the people who were seriously studying cybersecurity said, well, we're the white hats and those other guys are the black hats.
Yeah.
So now you have hackers who are doing some good, but also engaged in things like a little extortion.
Got it.
They're called the gray hats.
Thank you, because I sort of had an idea of what that meant, but you just cleared it up for me. Let's go over to Japan and see what they're doing in terms of vaccines. Apparently, if you are a citizen of Japan, you don't have to have vaccines, and they're having healthier children.
Yes, they are.
This is coming from Max Slavo at the hittheplan.com. Very sober site. I encourage you to look. And what the politicians in the U.S. do best to remove Americans' freedom of choice when it comes to vaccine is the polar opposite of what we see in Japan. No vaccine mandates in Japan, and their kids are growing up healthier than ours.
Yes, they are.
Now, officials in California are desperately trying to take away the rights of their residents by seeking to override medical opinion about whether or not a person is fit for vaccination.
So, in other words, members of the California legislature are saying, we know what's best for the children instead of their doctor.
Of course. And politicians in New York are now mandating the measles, mumps, rubella, MMR vaccine for 6 to 12 months old infants. And, the vaccine safety at that level of young hasn't been established. And by Merck's own admission, and if you're going into your pediatrician's office, if you're scheduled for a vaccination, say that you want to read the insert card, what may happen or what might not happen when your baby is given this.
And take along a magnifying glass, because they print those things with really small type.
I know. And you could give a 3 to 4 month old baby gastrointestinal illness and upper respiratory distress. And apparently, this stuff ups the baby's chances of getting sick with these serious health crises by 40 to 60% simply by getting a nurse or doctor to inject the so-called safe and effective MMR vaccine. Yes, the measles, mumps, and rubella shot, or choose any of them separate too, the results are absolutely the same.
Actually, you cannot get them separate anymore.
Not in the United States. Other places you can. But according to the FDA and a vaccine trial run on American kids, a shocking high percentage of the kids who were tested suffered extreme illnesses just days and weeks after getting the same vaccine that New York's Governor Bill Adolph de Blasio wants to utilize in order to force vaccinate all the Orthodox Jews who all know better and opt out using religious exemptions. Well, good for them. And they're doing some very interesting things on the forefront, by the way. The Canadian Orthodox community.
Yep.
There is a terrible disease called Tay-Sachs.
Yes.
It almost always happens with Mediterranean Jewish people. It's sad. But what their science has done, because kids are married in an arranged way, when the shidduch or the arrangement happens, one kid may have that problem, the other kid won't. Which means in a couple of generations, the Orthodox community in Canada will have literally gotten rid of the disease by doing something very clever, I think.
That is a very clever thing to do.
Yeah. And apparently the CDC has been fully exposed, only thanks to an FOIA request, Freedom of Information. And now the MMR may be considered, get ready for this, folks, especially if you have kids or family and friends have kids. This may be considered the third most dangerous vaccination known to humankind, running just behind the deadly HPV vaccine and the infamously defective and mercury-laden flu jab, you know.
They're still using mercury compounds.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
And, you know, and I've talked to my doctor about vaccinations, and I've said, you know, I'm going to be 70 in a couple of weeks. I don't think I really need them. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And she was very acquiescent. I'd like to go back over to the issue of Iran and how Google is suffocating Iranian media. Now, this comes to us from Sputnik News. And folks, if you've never read the English language of Sputnik News, I encourage you to do it.
Well, you still can.
Yeah, because these people are saying some very intelligent, insightful things that I think every American needs to know, especially in this time of such painful divisiveness in this country. And apparently the recent shutdown of Press TV and Hispan TV's YouTube and Gmail accounts are more demonstrations of a continued effort by the U.S. government to silence Iranian media outlets. And this comes from Alex Rubinstein, a journalist for Mint Press. And Rubinstein told Sputnik, I think this is part of a larger trend of cracking down on Iranian media. And he told Radio Sputnik's By Any Means Necessary this last Wednesday. Just as this was happening, the U.S. was saying that we want to bring down oil exports to zero. Well, it seems like they're also trying to bring down Iranian expression down to zero through these kinds of moves.
Well, this is another preparation for an eventual war.
Mm-hmm.
The corporate media is going to be talking about all the horrible things that Iranians do, and they don't want a counter voice out there. And we have seen massive interference with opposing points of view going into a lot of these wars.
Yeah.
And now they're ramping it up.
Yeah.
You know, back when it was, you know, taking an honest look at what was going on in Iraq to try and counter, you know, Saddam's nuclear weapons, which turned out not to exist.
Yeah.
It was very subtle because we all still had the First Amendment. But now that the government has convinced these private companies to act as the Ministry of Truth, it's a lot more complex. Now, I know that Alex Jones is asking Trump to intervene with these corporate media outlets. I don't think it's going to happen. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Claire, what is your next story?
Well, I'd like to finish up with this blacklisting and shunning by Google. Now, Israeli media outlets have thought that the order was handed down by Google after Hispan TV, which is the Iranian TV in Spanish, issued a report claiming imprisoned Palestinians were being used for medical experiments.
Well, that's been documented quite a few times.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, and of course we can get no real numbers on that because the Israeli are going to be very tight-lipped about that. But I did see this coming up all over the place, and in Palestinian sites and other sites. And if this is really going on, this is awful. This is really awful.
Well, you know, there's a lot of that going on in American prisons.
Yeah.
Although usually the prisoners are offered something in return.
Compensation,
like more privileges, early release, things like that. But still, given how dangerous these medications are, and it's also the possibility that what are being tested are not medicines, but biological weapons.
That is possible. Oh, and by the way, on 22 April, just this last week, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency reported, published reports that Israel does use Palestinian prisoners for new medical trials.
Well, there's your confirmation.
Yeah, and in the Jewish media, no less. Now, I'd like people to maybe take down these websites. One is presstv.com. That is an Iranian site in English. The second one is en.farsnews.com. If you look at them and these go, that is when you're going to have to prepare yourself, because these two outlets are my canaries in the coal mine regarding a potential hit against Iran. And I link to them frequently. And Fars News does a really lovely job in its English language division. And Mike, if we can't get that, I'm afraid, as my late grandmother used to say, the horse is out of the barn.
Well, the horse is out of the barn. I mean, it's very obvious there's a crackdown on anybody that is countering the official view of anything. And, sooner or later, they're going to be coming after RBN and whatreallyhappened.com. And we're going to be replaced with compromised independent media, which purports to be independent media,
but is not.
But they've got big budgets and lots of money. And, we don't get lots of money here. We could use it.
Yeah.
We could use it.
Yes.
I could use a big cash injection right now. Pretty please. I've been a good boy.
Yes, he has. God bless him. I'd like to also bop over to Syria, where apparently 18 have been killed by another car bomb in Syria's Idlib. And this comes to us from Middle East Monitor. And there was an explosion in the center of Jisr al-Shughar in the opposition stronghold of Idlib. And this is a day after heavy Russian airstrikes in the vicinity. That's what rescue workers and residents said. And several residential buildings collapsed as a result of a blast near the road between the coastal city of Latakia and the city of Aleppo. And why are they quoting this guy? Ahmad Yaiji, who is head of the White Helmets, and we know what the White Helmets are, folks. At least 40 others have been injured as rescue crews try to pull bodies from the rubble. So the fighting in Syria may be sporadic, but it hasn't stopped.
No, it hasn't stopped here.
Yeah.
Now, not that I'm, trying to come to the defense of car bombers everywhere.
No. Yeah.
But absent a photo that shows the car that blew up.
Yeah.
If this happened the day after the Russian airstrikes.
Yeah.
My next question would be, are we possibly looking at an unexploded munition that detonated a day later? Because with these cluster weapons, that is certainly within the American military, it's a known problem where not all of the munitions that are dispensed from a cluster container detonate on impact, and some can sit there for days or even weeks and then spontaneously go off.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have a caller on the line.
Oh, good.
So let me turn up your headset volume,
Thank
and we're
you.
going to go to Murr in Wisconsin. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi. Greetings, sweeties.
Hello.
I just wanted to tell you I saw a new report on Jim Stone just now about a live streaming that a fellow did around that crash in Lakewood, Colorado.
Yes.
And apparently there was a homeless man under the bridge that saved at least 4 people.
Oh,
well, good for
catching
him.
fire. And there were only 2 fatalities in that whole mess. So I thought that was pretty miraculous. I'll pop that in the email to you, but I thought that was some Good Friday news.
Yeah, that is some Good Friday news. Thank you, and I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
take care.
We're going to let you go here. Turn down Claire's headset volume.
Thank you, honey.
And let's see. We're coming up here on another commercial break. So stay tuned, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors, which are going to start right about now.
Okay.
All right. And Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and you have another story for us.
Oh, yes, I do. And this one you didn't read until you were going to sort of look between the lines, because I don't realize if this has been covered by any major news outlet.
No.
And what happened is that Facebook's Hire a Patriot Act co-author raises questions. This comes to us from Common Dreams and antiwar.com, another site to which I commend our readers and listeners. Apparently, social media giant Facebook made a big hire on Monday, bringing on lawyer Jennifer Newstead as the company's general counsel. And this is probably going to generate some criticism because Newstead worked 2 decades ago in drafting the Patriot Act. And they announced the hire by citing Newstead's extensive work in government. Most recently, Newstead acted as the legal advisor for the State Department. And during her time under Bush, Newstead was known as being the day-to-day manager of the Patriot Act in Congress, according to torture memo author John Yoo. And Facebook's Sheryl Sandberg is describing her as a seasoned leader whose global perspective and experience will help us fulfill our mission. Which mission is that, Miss Sandberg?
Well, we're obviously seeing a merger between government and these corporations.
Oh, yeah. And the way I look at it, Mike, hiring this woman points to the reality that Facebook is now part of the 4 arms of government. And we are looking at executive, legislative, judicial, and surveillance.
Well, I would almost say they're the fifth arm. Surveillance is definitely the fourth arm.
Okay.
But the fifth arm is definitely the Ministry of Truth.
Yes.
And by the way, as a corollary to this article, apparently Facebook and Google and YouTube and Twitter now want to build a single central processing facility for managing the news. And they're all going to send all of their feeds in there so that they have a consistent banning or shadow banning of people who are putting up posts that challenge the official view on anything.
Yeah, and I have to look at the timing of this hire. We're about barely a week, less than a week away from the waiver shutdown by the United States. And I have to wonder what kind of codswallop is going to be thrown down in the American people's faces that they're going to be expected to gobble it up with nary a criticism.
Well, it's going to be a very long time before the American people trust the government again.
Yep.
And in fact, the government may just be writing off the current generation of Americans and aiming at the children and the illegal immigrants who have not been here long enough to know the extent to which the government lies. Because as we go back and look at history, we begin to discover government has always lied to us. They lied to us about John F. Kennedy. They lied to us even about Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
We saw a show last night that made a very strong case that John Wilkes Booth actually survived the night of the assassination and lived to a ripe old age. So we know the government lied to us about the Bay of Pigs, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, so forth and so on. And politicians lie because it gets them what they want.
For the
access
moment.
to our wallets,
our
children for their wars. And if there's one thing the internet and the independent media took away from the politicians, it's that ability to lie. And they want to get it back. And the only way they can get it back is to bypass that First Amendment regarding freedom of speech and be able to basically shut down anybody who can get their points of view out on the internet. Now, presumably you'll still have a First Amendment right to freedom of speech, just talking to each other. But they want the press totally controlled, and the press that refuses to be controlled must be gotten rid of.
I would say that's about it.
Yep.
And what I think is about to come down militarily, I think we're going to be looking at a confrontation somewhere in the Middle East within at least the next month, possibly right after the waivers stop. And this is going to be another piece of poison which the American people might revolt over if not managed correctly. Now, I think that Newsed's task is to make that poison of whatever this government is about to do, most probably militarily, as sweet-tasting and as palatable as is humanly possible. So the American public won't know what an affront to both our government and our way of life has,
well, I think her job is less about content control and about building the legal case that this is okay for these private corporations to do. Because there are several class action lawsuits that are already in the pipeline basically saying that these internet service providers and corporate social media should not have a right to disconnect people they don't agree with. And it's spreading. Apparently Bank of America closed the accounts on a church over their views on homosexuality. And if you want to talk about signs of the corporatocracy, that's it right there. You know, if you don't agree with us on the gays, you don't get to have a bank account at Bank of America.
That's pretty terrible.
It's pretty scary. It's pretty scary.
And One of the corollary lawsuits that I think you were just talking about, there is an Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPIC. I like that. That's
Yes.
a nice acronym. Has formally accused Google of scanning billions of personal files of users at the request of the U.S. government. EPIC recently filed a friend of the court, I believe that's called amicus
brief.
Amicus brief, alleging that Google is helping the U.S. government conduct warrantless searches by scanning user files in search of potentially illegal content or evidence of crimes.
Well, now we know why the NSA is recommending shutting down the phone tapping system. They don't need it anymore.
No.
But if this is being done at the request of the U.S. government, then
Yep.
I would say that the First Amendment would apply, and so would the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why they hired this hotshot lawyer
Mhm.
to try and deal with these legal challenges.
Yeah, it's pretty scary how much of our freedoms have been taken
Yes.
away.
Yep.
Now, this I thought was a very interesting article, and it comes to us from Blacklisted News. If you haven't seen it, take a look. I think you will be informed by what they have, and this came originally from Business Insider. And it's stating or predicting that CRISPRed GMO food will probably stock grocery shelves within 5 years. Now, ethicists and the application of blockbuster gene editing tool CRISPR in human healthcare, an invention tool it believes has a more immediate application, improving our food. Improving our food, forgive me. Food and the human body have learned to agree over,
Yes.
work together over time. And every time we play with these building blocks of life, we know that it has dozens of potential uses, from treating diseases like sickle cell to inherited forms of blindness. And the tool was recently made headline news when a scientist in China reportedly used it to edit the DNA of a pair of twin baby girls. I think when this stuff comes on, I'm going to form a very good relationship with someone who has a farm or a store that will only sell non-GMO products. Yeah. I think they're going to have a run for their money, and unfortunately, it may cost lives before the real impact of this has come out.
Again, look at the vaccine scandal. That's
Yeah.
already costing lives.
Yeah.
And nothing's being done about it.
Mhm.
It's, again, all about making the money.
Mhm.
They want to take away ordinary people's ability to provide for themselves.
Yep.
And, there's zoning laws against farming food on your property now in a
Mhm.
lot of states,
Yep.
although Florida just opened it up and said it's okay to grow food crops on your front lawns, which I think was a really good thing. But really, if you have land around your home,
Mhm.
you ought to be thinking about getting some heritage seeds.
Yes.
These are ones that have not been messed with.
Yeah.
They're just saved over generations of the plant.
Mhm.
And start putting in your own food.
Yeah.
Because exposure to this stuff is cumulative.
Yes.
And my concern with CRISPR, as I understand how it operates, it doesn't go on into a gene and simply snap it apart, change a gene, and put it back together. It's literally crashing new segments of genetic material into a gap created by the removal of the old genetic material.
Mhm.
And there have been some problems with it,
Yeah.
which CRISPR says has all been ironed out, but
Of
then all
course.
corporations would say that.
Mhm.
And again, my opposition to GMO technology, this is the most dangerous technology humans have ever played with, worse than nuclear power.
I hear you.
And a lot of people will write me and say, if you're so convinced that the universe must be filled with intelligent life, why are you so opposed to all these stories about flying saucers and alien spaceships here on Earth? And my reply is basically twofold. One, what do we have that would be of interest to them,
Mhm.
that's worth the energy to
Yeah.
slow down, visit, and then reaccelerate? But the other one is simple. What if every technological civilization hits this point in its evolution where it starts to play with its own code of life?
And it crashes and burns.
And it basically
Yeah.
creates an
Yeah.
extinction level event
Mhm.
and wipes itself out. And boy, what a terrible thing to happen
Mhm.
to an entire species.
Well, I remember many years ago, one of my favorite commentators on ABC NLA was Michael Jackson,
Yes.
not the singer, the other Michael Jackson.
Yes.
And he said that in looking at our planet, civilized beings from other civilizations would say the major occupation of these beings is tribal warfare.
Yes.
And, the weapons may get better, yada, yada, but it does not obviate the fact that that's still kind of our basic pastime.
Well, it certainly is in the current day and age.
Mm-hmm.
The United States is just making war on pretty much everybody here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, this was something I did not know about in the history of Japan.
Yes.
Apparently, they are extending apologies and restitutions to victims of forced sterilization law. And they apologized to literally thousands of people for forcibly sterilizing them under a now defunct eugenics program and offered victims money in compensation. And the government of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has devoted 3.2 million yen, doesn't sound like that much in American, that's 28,000, to all surviving victims of the program, while Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga extended sincere remorse and heartfelt apology. Now, apparently...
Well, here's your harakiri knife.
Okay. Now, this was done under under Japan's eugenics protection law, and the program ran until 1996. I had no idea. And what they were targeting was people with hereditary diseases for forced sterilization, surgeries, and vasectomies. And the law was designed to prevent the birth of poor quality descendants. And that was how they viewed them. Remember how in Harry Potter,
Yeah.
The Muggles, who are part human, part sorcerer,
The mudbloods.
are looked on as bad and nasty and
Yeah.
evil. And
Well, it's hardly a unique attitude.
No.
I mean, there are so many different groups of people around the world
Mhm.
who see themselves as automatically superior,
Mhm.
and wouldn't the world be better off without the others? Now, a lot of people will point to the Nazis and Adolf Hitler
Yep.
with their forced sterilization and their eugenics programs, forgetting that Hitler got the idea for race hygiene from the American eugenics
yes.
program of the
Yes.
1930s.
yeah.
And in fact, even corresponded with some of those academics and thanked them for their books.
Mhm.
And that's where he got the idea. And there were eugenics programs here in the United States. And sometimes the forced sterilizations were rather arbitrary. Prostitutes were forcibly sterilized just because they were prostitutes.
Mhm.
And you get into this sort of thing when the government takes on the role of being God
Yep.
and sees the people as property to be managed, which unfortunately is a situation we're currently in this country.
Mhm. I'd like to go to another story that is part of a stream of very uncomfortable documentations of what police are doing in this country.
Yes.
And apparently, the cops shot a fleeing man and tortured him with a canine after surrender, and taxpayers are liable. Now, this comes to us from Matt Agarist at the Free Thought Project.
Yes.
Matt, if you're ever on Oahu, give us a call. We'd love to break bread with you.
Okay, but only until the end of summer, because we're going to be in
Yes.
Indiana after that.
Right.
I hope.
Yeah, and this comes out of Phoenix, where Antonio Garcia Goff went missing in July of 2017, and the family, in desperation, turned to the Phoenix Police Department. They claim to have attempted to file a missing persons, but when the police found Goff, instead of returning him to his family, one officer attempted to kill him, and another forced his dog to maul him, according to a lawsuit filed this week. Folks, I'm thinking maybe calling the police is not your first choice anymore.
Nope.
It might have been 50 or 100 years ago, not now. You may want to go with a private detective agency. You may want to go with some people who are trained in counseling. This guy was having a rough time with getting on and off drugs and prescriptions. But if there was ever something awful right now, I don't know if I was living on the mainland if I would want to call their police department. I just don't know. I'm not confident enough in them right at the moment to do it. And Mike,
Yes.
what would you have to say about this?
There have been way too many of these incidents of just unreasoning police brutality and lethality against people. Now, in this case, the guy was running away from them, but that doesn't justify shooting him as opposed to perhaps using the taser, which can also, unfortunately, sadly be lethal.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing is an attitude shift in the police. Now, for the most part here on Oahu, the police are not like that.
No, we're very blessed with HPD.
Yeah, we've only had one ugly incident where a cop shot an indigenous Hawaiian who was praying over a wounded dolphin on the beach. And here in Hawaii, touching a marine mammal is a tacky no-no. But this guy was just praying over it, and this cop just hauled off and shot him dead. And the cop had just newly transferred from another jurisdiction, and hopefully they transferred him back. But yeah, it's a war zone out there. Okay, we're going to take another commercial break. We're going to be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Final segment of our program on this Kaonohi Friday. And Claire, you've got another story for us.
Yes, I do. And it is the supreme irony of supreme ironies. And maybe a kiss of death for Joe Biden, not literally, please, but just metaphorically. And this comes to us through Zero Hedge, originally by Norman Solomon in counterpunch.org. And they're going on to say Joe Biden is an absolute phony. And
Aren't they all?
Yeah, but his big job, since he's running for president, is finding out ways to hide the phoniness. Because there weren't going to be a lot of small donors. The Biden campaign is depending on big checks from the rich and the corporate elite who very much appreciate his services rendered.
Well, all of the candidates are like that. They don't do hardly any grassroots fundraising because there's not that much money there.
Yeah.
They do enough of it where they can say we're, advocates for the people. But ever since they repealed campaign donation limits, our politicians are for sale to the highest bidder.
They're acquisitions.
Yeah. And the Capitol building is a one-stop shopping mall for all of the corrupting influences in our society.
Yeah, he wants to appear to potential voters as good old lunch pail Joe Biden. But the actual story of his history is really very different. And in his first Senate term during the 70s, Biden was speaking white backlash rhetoric, using tropes pandering to racism, and teamed up with arch segregationalists against measures like busing for school integration. He went on to be a fount of racially charged appeals and predators on our street oratory on the Senate floor as he led the successful effort to pass the now notorious 1994 crime bill.
Okay, Claire speaks.
Yes, take two. All right. And apparently, every time the guy had a gavel in his hand, it's proven dangerous. We saw this in 1991 when he was, as the chair of the Judiciary Committee, Biden prevented key witnesses from testifying to corroborate Anita Hill's accusation harassment during the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings. In 2002, as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, Biden was the Senate's most crucial supporter of the invasion of Iraq.
Yep.
And for over 4 decades, while the corporate media is creating something of him he isn't, Biden has continued to assist for strengthening oligarchy as a powerful champion of legalizing corporate plunder on a mind-boggling
a lot of right now
scale. And here is the KOD, all right, which happened, I think, earlier this week. And now that Biden has arrived as a presidential candidate to rescue the Democratic Party from Bernie Sanders, guess who endorses him on Twitter? Drum roll, please.
Michael Avenatti
endorsed him on Twitter.
All right.
Oh,
there's our music here. Okay. Our time is up. So let's take a look at this.
Okay.
Okay, I was just checking sound levels because it's getting a little hot.
All right.
All right, so it's the end of our show. Please stay tuned for John Stadmuller.
Yes.
I'm sure he's going to have lots more information for you. And please donate to Republic Broadcasting.
Yes.
Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com.
Yep.
We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.
And have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.